Well, hi everyone. Today we have Anne from the Default Cook with us today. How are you today, Anne?
I'm great, and either way you want to pronounce it is fine. Tomato, tomato.
That's right? Like it's not the worst thing. It's just yeah. How do you pronounce certain words? Somewhere you come from, I guess. So tell us a little bit about yourself first before we dive in.
Oh goodness. Okay, so
Put
I'm
yourself.
mom of two. I'm actually a chemical engineer by degree, and so I did a lot of like experimenting with like labs and wastewaters and things, and I've learned that experimenting in the kitchen is definitely my preferred experimentation because I get to eat the results.
That's right. Very nice.
So that's kind of how I transitioned into food, and also I love food. Yes, but think so I've got two kids. They're kind of little, and I make a lot of family friendly meals. And I think my husband's Greek, so I do some Greek stuff, not a lot, because it can be a little less like default, but
Right.
sometimes the occasion calls for it, and I bust out the church cookbook.
There you go. Oh gosh, I love the church cookbooks. Love the church cookbooks. They're some of my favorite things. Whenever I see them at a yard sale, I'm picking them up. I love the church cookbooks. Good.
And the recipes in those are so good, like,
Yes.
because they only take the best ones. They get submissions from how many people, and it's
Right.
the so and so that brings that treat to the festival. Like, that's the recipe you want.
Right. And nobody wants to put anything in there that's not going to be excellent because you don't want your name attached to it, right? Because the shame.
Exactly.
The
Exactly. And they
shame.
do. They all have their names listed out. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. A couple of
So
my
great.
husband's great aunts were contributors to that one.
Wonderful. Also, that's great. So you get it. And we are going to talk today about an old-fashioned ginger snap recipe that you have on your blog that I tried. And so tell us, before we dive too much into the recipe, tell us a little bit about the history of the recipe in your family, please.
So it's my husband's grandmother's recipe. And I don't know if it's older than her. She might have gotten it from, I kind of suspect that it may have come from her side, but I'm not 100% sure where she got it. I've seen the recipe card. We have a picture of the recipe card that goes around. I'm not sure who in the family has the actual original, but it's, the little 3x5 index with everything written down, and it calls for a molasses brand that has long been out of business. So we use the grandma's brand now because that's what you can find in most grocery stores. But it's love making it. It's my husband's absolute favorite recipe for cookies. And it is a Depression era recipe. So there's no eggs, there's no butter, there's nothing from the refrigerator. So the one thing that is odd about this recipe from most cookie recipes is you rest it, but you don't chill it. You sit it out overnight. And the first time I read that, I was like, on the recipe card, I was like, really? Because usually we would just get to Christmas and she would have cookies out. We weren't making them with her because we live out of town. So we never got to like make them with her. Just got the recipe card and was like, oh, we just leave that overnight. And then you think about it and you're like, well, there's no dairy, there's no butter, there's no eggs, there's no milk, there's no cream, there's no like, okay, everything came out of the pantry that goes in it. So I guess it's fine. And it is.
It is fine because I did make it and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I too was like not chilling it. And then in the morning, of course, because the recipe calls for, we will link the recipe, of course. It tells you to just put it in the bowl, mix the dough and cover it with a towel, kind of like bread, essentially, if you're rising bread. And in the morning, I was like, and I first felt it. I was like, I wonder if I let it get too dry. Like, did I do something? But it was fine. It absolutely was not. Once you kind of like mold it and roll it into the little ropes like you suggest. So great. And I was thinking about this and I was like, well, you normally make ginger snaps kind of in the winter time because, spice things tend to be Christmas, winter time here. And I was like, well, it kind of makes sense that there's no eggs because chickens lay eggs more when there's a lot of sunlight and there's less sunlight in the winter, right? And so I was like, okay, well, that would make sense from an old-fashioned recipe standpoint. It is really good. And it does use melted lard instead of melted butter, which most of us would probably think of. Now, have you ever tried making it with butter or like shortening instead of lard?
I think shortening would probably work if somebody needed to make it
not with pork product was what I was
get
thinking.
Without pork products, right? Because that is the concern. I'm very clear about that if I exchange cookies around the holidays. Like, hey, this does contain lard so that people know what they're getting.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Nope, you're fine.
Yeah, I have not personally done it because I'm like, if I'm making it, like my husband's like right there in the like,
Yeah.
ooh, and I don't want it to not be the way he remembers. But I do think that a vegetable shortening, like a shortening, would be a bit more similar
Right.
to the lard than a butter would be, and that would also be, you could let it dry out probably overnight, because Crisco, shortening is shelf stable as well, whereas butter,
Right.
you wouldn't be able to let it sit out overnight,
Right.
and so it might not dry out as similarly, because you don't add a lot of flour after that point, and if you add too much flour, it will crumble. Like the dough gets hard to work with if there's too much flour in it.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, well, how would you make this so that, you could make it vegan or vegetarian or, kosher even for someone who might be Jewish. So yeah,
Right.
so shortening would probably be the better choice. And that makes a lot of sense. I happen to always have lard around, so it's easy enough for me to try it. And I was excited about that because I don't have a ton of, other than like pie crust, right? Or
Right.
just using lard to like saute vegetables or whatever. I don't have a ton of recipes that use lard. And so it was fun to try and make cookies. I have made like chocolate chip cookies and a few other things in the past with lard, but I don't know. I just always go back to butter. But I really enjoyed the lard in this case. It was a very flavorful and really quite a wonderful a fun way to make something different if you have lard around, And if you don't, I'd still say do it because it's fun.
It is. And you buy it as small as like a 1 pound brick. At least my grocery store carries a 1 pounder. So it's not like you have to commit to like the tub of lard. You can get a 1 pound brick of it.
Yeah.
And it's generally, I don't want to say that it's cheap, but it's cheaper than butter.
Right. It is. And so I will say we buy a whole hog from a local farmer once a year.
Nice.
And I get the lard, the leaf lard. I have to render it myself.
Okay.
So that's what I do, and then do that. Now, I will say this for anyone, there's a whole process to rendering lard. It's not difficult, it takes time, but it does not have the most pleasant aroma, smell.
I can see that.
Yeah. So what I do is I do it outside.
Okay.
Like I do it in my crock pot on the porch so I don't have to smell it in the house.
That's smart.
That's just an aside for anybody who might want to try it. And it's funny because for the most part, those kinds of smells don't bother me, but generally like beef broth cooking or whatever, like certain smells that bother a lot of people don't bother me, but that one I don't love it. My husband doesn't either. So outside on the porch it goes. But now I have a new recipe to try. And so the recipe is a pretty basic cookie recipe. I mean, other than it does use melted lard and there's no eggs, but then it's just flour and spices and water and molasses. Now I used blackstrap molasses because your recipe didn't really say what kind of.
Okay.
Now, do you use a specific kind when you make it? Because you said her recipe card has one that's no longer around, but
her recipe called for, let me see if I can actually have it here. Let me know if me switching windows is messing things up.
Nope, you're fine.
She called for mild Brer Rabbit yellow label, which is not, I've looked for, like it doesn't really exist anymore. But so we just usually use grandma's because that's what we'd heard her, that she'd switched to after she couldn't get that at the store anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I use grandma's too, and it's blackstrap. The one I use is blackstrap, but I'm sure they have different kinds. Yeah. Because that's just the kind I always have. It's the really dark kind.
Okay. To me, they're all dark, but my store, like I'm in, like my grocery store only carries one. So like that's the one I get.
That's the one you use. So mine usually has a couple different kinds. And I know there is a light, like a golden molasses, but I never buy it. I always just buy the blackstrap.
Okay.
Because I use it molasses in bread and a few other things too. So molasses for me is a pantry staple. It's a pantry staple. I always have it. But if you don't have it, just use whatever you're saying. Just use whatever the grocery store has and don't worry about it. Very nice.
Yeah, no, it's good to know that it's good with blackstrap because I'm not sure that's, I think what I use is more mild, but that's because it's what's available to me.
Right. And the blackstrap tends to be a little more bitter. I think based on, like anything, you should just use what your family prefers. But if you don't know, then just use what the grocery store has. And it does have some brown sugar in there, so that sweetens it up. And then you do press it into more sugar before you bake, which adds a nice little layer of crunch and a little more sweetness. So I thought it was just perfect. I thought it was really perfectly balanced between the bitter and the sweet. and they are just lovely, thin, crunchy. They're exactly what you think a ginger snap should be, right? Like, I mean, they're exactly, they crispy and crunchy, and they're just exactly what you think, and tons of flavor. So perfect, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure she would be super thrilled to hear that, or is super thrilled to hear that, because she is no longer with us. So
Right.
she might be hearing it now.
There you go. And now you said the recipe dated to 1936. Is that right? Do I have that right? You think?
I'm not 100% sure, but she's just passed a few years ago, and she was in her 90s. So, and I know she'd been making it for a very long time.
Right.
So definitely an older
40s,
recipe, but I'm not sure I could
yeah.
put an actual date to it.
That's fine. I was just curious, just because always curious. And so your family, do you eat these only at the Christmas time, or do you eat them all year round? Or
so we make them at Christmas time, and basically anytime we get together. So especially because there's some dietary restrictions in my husband's side of the family, and so my father-in-law does not get these very often. So basically anytime we get the family together, we'll make them so that he can have those. Yeah, there's a couple gluten-free folks in the family, and it's one of them is my mother-in-law, so she's understandably not going to make like 100 cookies that she cannot take a single bite of,
right?
Because rolling them out individually, it takes some time, and that's also one of the things that makes it fun to do with family. So like when we get together, we can do it kind of together, and then it goes a little faster and is more of like a family activity.
Sure. And so the recipe is you roll it out into like a long rope.
Yes.
And then cut it and then press it into the sugar and bake, which I had never really done with any cookie ever. I don't think ever in my life. I mean, I've rolled them out into like ropes and then done like shapes maybe with them, but not very often.
Oh, like the Kulurakia.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And then, or like, rolled it out into a sheet and cut with cookie cutters, of course.
Right.
But never like that. And I will say, I was like, oh, this is so different for me. Like, I wonder how this is going to be. And it really is fabulous. And because there's a lot of baking soda, there's like a whole tablespoon.
There is.
So they really spread.
Me.
Yeah, it really spreads, which is perfect, which is why they get so thin and crispy.
That is why they get so thin and crispy.
That's the science behind it, for in case anybody ever wants to know. If there's baking soda, they'll spread. And so that was really kind of interesting to me. And that is actually easier to some extent than rolling and cutting with a cookie cutter. And you don't have to re-roll, right? Because you always have to re-roll. You don't have to do any of that.
I sometimes end up re-rolling some because you'll get like a little bit at the end of the rope. And then that just goes into the next ball for the next rope.
Right. Which is exactly how
I forget. It yeah. No, that's perfect. And I forget how we figured out that was how we did it. Because again, like we're just like when I made the recipe, I was starting from that recipe card, and I knew what they tasted like. I knew what they looked like, and I knew what was on the index card. But it took a little time to figure out the in-betweens.
Oh, right. Because she probably didn't, right? Her recipe card is just like the ingredients and maybe the temperature, and that's probably...
Yeah, the ingredients mixed together, mix the night before, do not refrigerate, like made it to the index card, and then below it's like 350 for 6 minutes, top 6 minute bottom, and it's like, and they do not take 12 minutes. I tried that once. It was like, it seems like a long time for these, and yeah, 12 minutes is too much. So I think it was like 6 minutes in the top oven and 6 minutes in the like put another tray in the bottom oven, maybe. I'm still not sure what that meant on the recipe card.
That's funny. Yeah, because women back then just expected you to know how to cook. Mm-hmm. So, right, like, I mean, I know that when I look at other older recipes, they just expected you to know things that a lot of us maybe don't necessarily know. I mean, I know because I have a lot of experience in the kitchen like you do. So you just kind of know. Plus you also just kind of, even if you don't know, when you have a lot of experience, you kind of have an intuition about how things are going to sort of work, right? Like, when you're making a recipe, like, oh, no, this isn't right. Or, oh, yeah, this will be fine. So you just kind of know after a while. But back then, women just knew because they were cooking from the time they were like 5.
Right. And they were doing it right next to somebody and learning it. And then they'd done it. And so the index card was just a reminder. Right. It wasn't a how-to. It was just a, like, these are the ratios, and like remember this temperature in this many minutes, about this many minutes.
Right, right. And it's because you wanted to, you know, okay, I like the cookies with this amount of cinnamon and this amount of ginger. And so I want to make sure I don't forget that. Like it's always the same. That's why they wrote things down, not because they
Right.
wouldn't really remember something they did all the time, I think. I mean, that's my opinion. And that's why I write things down, is because I know I like a certain recipe and I want to make sure I can repeat the results. Obviously, there's
Yes.
plenty of times when I'm cooking that I don't do that. And then inevitably later, my husband will be like, that was really good. Can we make that again? No.
Every time you don't write stuff down and just fly by the seat of your pants is when it's delicious, and your family is like, this was amazing. Can you make this every week? And you're like, I hope you enjoyed it, because
we will never have it again.
I will probably never fully replicate that. I did not measure anything.
Right. And that's always the way. So I try to avoid that, but there's plenty of times when you're, especially when you've got small children and you're just trying to like get food on the table, it's not always possible to, and I totally get it, but you're right. Inevitably, that's the time that it turns out perfect, amazing, wonderful. Yeah. And you can't.
Yeah. And then I'll try and like write down for myself in those cases, like about how much I think I used of stuff. And then that's at least a starting point to go back to. But yeah, it's not like slam dunk and we can just repeat that every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Inevitably. Nope. Right. But that's why we write things down, everybody. Get yourself a little notebook.
That is.
Because we cannot trust our
because your brain will betray you and it will not remember.
I heard a quote one time that was like, your brain will remember things for like 10 minutes tops. And that's if nothing else like bothers you or comes into your frame of reference. So if you don't write it down, unless
it's song lyrics from 40 years ago,
right?
In which case,
yes, if it was
you still know them.
Like, that's right. That's true. It's funny, isn't it? The way the brain works. And inevitably, I just write things down because I know I don't trust my memory, and I do have a good memory, but I write things down because I won't remember, especially in the kitchen because I'm always doing a lot of different things. It's so wonderful. And so you mentioned in your recipe that, so we roll the dough out into a rope and then cut them into like 2-inch pieces and then press them into the sugar. Yes. I used, just because I wanted to play a little bit, I used the raw sugar instead of just plain granulated sugar, and it was really good. And it did add just like a extra little crunch that like probably regular granulated sugar wouldn't, because it's bigger crystals. But just for anyone who's making it, I was just playing regular granulated sugar will work just fine. Use what you have in your pantry. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of using what you have on hand, and raw sugar would be great. I don't usually buy it because it's a little spendier than the granulated sugar. But yeah, and that's the other funny thing about like recipe cards. Like the granulated sugar is not on the recipe card, but I remember what they like when I made it without it. It was like something's missing. Like this doesn't look like grandma's.
Right.
And then I tried that, and it was like, there it is. That's what was missing. But she didn't need to put that on a card because she knew.
Right. She just knew to do that. That's funny. Yeah. And it is really good. And then we were talking about the fact that you let the dough sit overnight, which is like so wonderful. Like for anyone who's like ever, like it is sometimes, sometimes you just want a cookie and you want a cookie now. And so obviously the idea of chilling and letting something sit overnight, I get it. I understand why like it's not always great, but there are plenty of times in your life where you're just like, mix it up, go to sleep, wake up. And then like, which is what I did. I mixed it up even probably a few hours before I went to bed. Right. And then in the morning, we just kind of had a leisurely morning, had coffee like we always do, like on a Sunday morning. And then I just did it. And it was like so relaxing and easy to do. And I'm all about, let's just take a little time. And so you stretch it out. But it's really like you did this prep work ahead of time so that you can have cookies pretty fast in the morning if you really want.
Yes.
To. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get started baking in the morning, it can go pretty quick. And yeah, it's like yesterday you did today you such a favor making the dough for you.
Right.
I'm like, thanks, pass me.
That's right. And I have like the giant cookie sheets because I do a lot of baking. And so I have like the giant cookie sheets, and I think I put like 20 or so on a sheet, right? So, and I gave them plenty of room, of course, because I was afraid they were going to spread. So I've got big sheets. And so that, like, so for me, like it really was fast to mix up. And I just did a single batch. I didn't like double it or anything. But you probably, if you're serving like a whole family, you probably double it. Yeah. Like if you're taking it to a gathering.
We do. And the recipe that's on the website is actually a half batch of grandma's.
Okay.
because otherwise it's because a double batch is pretty intimidating, especially if you're like, this is new to me. I've never tried this before. Like, it's a lot to
Yeah.
do. I've had to do that with a couple of her cookie recipes. The kuluraki are the same way, where it's what's on my website is actually a half batch,
Right.
because the original recipe was like, and a 5-pound bag of flour, and I'm like, that might be a little much for folks.
Right, because she's
We don't
making it
always
for
need
like a
that many
huge
cookies.
gathering.
We're not always
Right.
cooking for the festival.
That is so great, though. I love that. Can you imagine?
Yes. You know, grandkids coming over and family coming over all the time. So yeah, at Christmas, like, I'm always going to make a double batch. But if I was just like making them for my husband, I would make what's on the site.
Right. And just for everyone else, because we're a household of 2 at my house. I've said this before in other podcasts. So I just made the recipe. Often I will have a recipe, but for cookies, I'm always like, well, they freeze, right? So, which is what we did.
Right.
I froze them and they freeze great. In fact, my husband has been enjoying a couple frozen ones with his coffee mid-morning. So anybody who makes the recipe, if you do want to double it, and just know that they freeze really well, and you could make a big batch and then just pull them out when you want. Snack. I'm all about like
Absolutely. And then you have ginger cookies just waiting for you.
Right. And you could absolutely, you know, pull a couple out. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, and I bet it, if anything, it makes your freezer smell better, because all the cinnamon and everything. Like, usually when you freeze something, like, scent kind of goes away, but if any lingers, it'll be good.
Right. And the nice thing about freezing cookies is that you can pull just a couple out in the morning and like tuck them into a lunchbox. They'll definitely be thawed by lunch, and so it's perfect. Mm-hmm. And these, because they're so thin, they don't take that long to thaw really at all. And I tried one last night when it was like completely frozen, and it was fine. To just kind of like bite right through. So
it's just extra snappy.
That's right. Extra snappy. And it's good because there's so much, and there is just this wonderful bite of ginger, because there is a tablespoon and a half, right, of ginger, I think, in that half recipe that you gave us. And so that's quite a bit of ginger, and it's just, but it has that nice kind of warm sensation that you get from ginger. That's just perfect. So perfect. Great. And for somebody who might be new to baking,
much, but it definitely has that ginger bite.
And for somebody who might be new to baking in general, do you have any tips for them about this recipe in particular?
I would say make sure you measure out everything accurately, because if you end up with too much ginger or too much baking soda, it just double I guess it's more of a carpenter term of like measure twice, cut once. Like, just double check that you're measuring everything well, because I've definitely messed that up before, where I'm like making with family and we're chatting and having a good time and not paying attention enough to what we're doing, and that can mess things up. So I would just make sure you're really careful with measuring and getting the right ones, the right ingredients there. But the other thing is, if you will need, err on the side of less flour, because you can always add more. You can always add some to your work surface when you're rolling things out, and it'll absorb more as it goes. But if you add too much flour, it'll get crumbly and hard to work with. And it just, not that it won't taste good, but it'll just be a lot more work to shape and get onto your cookie tray.
That is a very good tip. That's a very good tip. And and your recipe does say, you know, first it might seem looser than a normal cookie dough. And I always appreciate that when I'm reading a recipe, when you tell me it's not going to look like you're expecting it to look, so that you know this is still right. It's just not what you're used to.
Right. And that's part of why it sits out overnight. It does two things. That lets it, one, lose a little bit of moisture to the air, because again, it is made usually in winter, and particularly in Vegas, everything loses moisture to the air. And then the other thing is that it lets that lard harden back up and set all the way back up. So we melt the lard, and then the spices go in and they get a chance to kind of bloom in that melted fat, but then it needs to set back up before we bake it. Right. But it can do that at room temperature. Lard, is very, very solid at room temperature.
Yes, it sure is. It is. It's very solid all the time. Okay, so that's a great tip. And I would say, just like I always say in any recipe, just follow it along and try it. And then if something you don't like, or, maybe it is too much ginger, you could always add less for your family, or, switch molasses.
Yeah, if it's a little bitier than you care for, you can always tone it down.
Right. But don't do that the first time, because it's really worth trying. And I honestly believe it was just perfect in my experience. My opinion, it was just exactly what I expect of a ginger snap. And I would say ginger snaps are probably not my first choice when it comes to cookies. I like them. Like, I'm not going to turn them down, never, right? But
there are not a lot of cookies in this world that I would turn down.
Yeah, me either. But But I would probably, like, if I was just making cookies just for myself, they probably wouldn't be they wouldn't be top of mind. Let's put it that way. But these were so, so good. You will love them. Well, great. All right. And we'll tell everybody where they can find you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and same. I make them a lot because they're my husband's favorite.
Right.
But like for me, like I enjoy them, but they're not my favorite. And my husband was very disappointed that they also turned out to be my daughter's favorite because now he has to share them a lot more.
That's great. That's great. And I was going to say, I feel like these are like a man cookie, or at least the men in my life really like a spicy, gingery molasses kind of. Like my dad loves it. My husband loves it. Like all the men I kind of know love those kind of cookies. So I'm not sure that's a universal truth, but it seems to be.
It's my brother-in-law's favorite too, though. So I don't know. My father-in-law prefers the Greek cookie. But both my husband and his brother, the ginger snap is their favorite.
That's very funny. Great. All right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Oh, of course.
Obviously,
so
not showing up at your house.
My website is thedefaultcook.com. Yeah. That'd be weird.
Yeah.
So online, I'm at thedefaultcook.com and I'm at thedefaultcook on basically every platform. I'm not active on all of them, but I do believe I have the username secured on all of those. So I'm probably most active on Facebook because I'm a geriatric millennial, but I'm on the other ones a little bit too.
Right. And then you have a podcast too, correct? So tell us a little bit about the podcast.
I do. Sure. So my podcast is called Easier Meals, and it's what it sounds like. So it's easy meals, and I actually walk through how to make things. So we talk about like what the ingredients are, what equipment we're going to need, and then the step by step. And my intention there when I first made it was that, busy parents can pop on the podcast in their car when they're at pickup or while they're folding laundry, because not everybody can stop and read a blog post all the time, or even like have the attention to watch a video all the time. So that's where that came from. So I read through a recipe, and sometimes they're mine, sometimes they're other people's, with their permission, of course. And we talk about just something that we can get on the table. Generally, it's a meal. Sometimes it's a side dish, but usually a meal. And I actually have a episode for the ginger snaps. So if somebody wants to listen through, like while they're baking or while they're driving along, they can do that.
That's great. I'll grab the link for that so people can actually go and find that specific episode, but the entire podcast in the show notes for everyone. That'll be great. Well, thank you so much for sharing about this. I really appreciate it and so enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. This was wonderful.